Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to another episode of our Entitled People, where in this episode, you'll hear more outrageous stories about people who want more than they deserve. Guys, I hope you're having a great day today. And if it's not so great, I hope these stories will brighten up your day by making your blood boil. I'm just kidding. I hope you enjoy these ridiculously entitled stories and do hit that subscribe button for future tales, guys, if you aren't subscribed. We're diving in. So a little bit of backstory. My stepmother and I never got along from day one, especially when she turned into a more and more entitled psycho stepmom as I got into my later teenage years, and she was the reason I moved out of my father's house to live full-time with my mom. Now, the details aren't important, but the list is a hefty one. The most important one for this account is snooping. Now, my stepmom has to stick her nose in my life, my room, my car, my job, my health, etc. to a comical degree. She's also done some pretty pointless petty things like giving me a false key to her and my dad's house. This is also important. Now, one of the most recent entitled moments happened in the summer of 2020. So my stepmom finds out that I'm buying a house and she calls me saying, "Hey, I want a key to your house when it closes." I tell her, "No," and she says, "What do you mean no? You will give me a key." So I then asked her a real or a fake key, as she wasn't specific. She told me she wanted a real key, and I asked, "Why would I do that given your track record?" And she says, "Because I'm your parent. You need to give me a key." So with that, I laugh, and she says, "I don't see what's so funny. I'm asking for a key, and I will get one." Asking, "You're demanding a key from your 25-year-old stepson who owes you nothing." I tell her that I want my dresser back too, as we agreed upon all those years ago. She then tells me that she isn't giving me anything until she gets a key to my house. I then say, "So you're just gonna steal from me and you're throwing a fit because I won't give you a key to my house, where you'll try to come in whenever you want to snoop on me?" She then says, "Young man, you have a history of making poor choices and it's my job to correct them. Now, I couldn't do it while you were in Ohio, and now that you're back, I will get you back on the straight and narrow." Now, I should point out that my poor choices involved eating in my room while doing homework, watching TV with my girlfriend when I was a teenager, and not going to bed by 10 p.m. on the dot. She's a nutty, controlling woman who gets mad at me for anything that isn't in her micron-sized list of appropriate actions for me. So I then tell her, "No, you won't be getting a key, and because of you, Dad won't likely get one either because you can't be trusted." And then I ended the call. So not 5 minutes later, my mom and stepdad are rolling on the floor laughing because she had called my mom and demanded that my mom talk some sense into me and make me give her a key. Now, neither my mom nor stepfather can stand my entitled stepmom. Now, here's where she truly shines though. This happened the following day. She decided to come at me with a different approach. So my stepmom calls me and says, "Hey, so have you thought about giving me a key?" I told her, "No, you don't get one." She then says, "Even for your favorite step-parent?" Now at this, I laughed hysterically and said, "Huh, I like the stuff in my cat's litter box more than I like you." Now at this, she said, "Fine, you leave me no choice. You're gonna lose your car. I forbid you from driving, and I'll expect your keys tonight." I told her, you wanna take the keys to a car that you don't own or pay anything on because you won't take no for an answer?" And she replies, "I'm your parent. You need to do what I say." So at this point, I hung up after she starts yelling. She showed up at my mother's house 10 minutes later demanding the keys to my car because she was revoking her permission for me to drive, and we had to call our neighbor, the off-duty cop, to come over to speak to her. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to put a lien on my car because more insane things have happened. It's so bad that my dad is agreeing that he shouldn't get a key, but I don't know why he won't leave her because of her usual entitled behavior. OP, listen, your dad hasn't left her because the woman is nice to him now, but bring up, "Oh, yeah, I don't think this is working out," and she might go full scorched earth psycho, and she'll take everything from him. Probably everything down to the last bag of frozen blueberries in his freezer. Like, yeah, I understand giving the house keys to parents who respect your privacy, like, 100%. But to a psycho control freak that you don't like, yeah, no. Like, the last thing you need is for her to come prancing in your house at 2 a.m. to make sure you're not up playing Call of Duty instead of sleeping or something. I love this comment right here, though. This person says, "Next time she claims to be your parent, ask her to remind you how much time she spent in labor with you." Oof, I can feel that comment from here, guys. Now, at the time this happened, I was 32 years old. I'm an army vet and was shot 7 months earlier and was still recovering. My girlfriend Katie, who is also in the army, came home from deployment, and we decided to finally come out to our parents as lesbian. And our parents were very accepting, thankfully. Now, my mom was from a very Christian family, who were very openly racist, homophobic, sexist, classist, and probably many other things. My mom was the youngest child and was picked on a lot by her family, and it only got worse once my older sister came into existence. I'm not a typical girly girl. I was always roughhousing with the boys in primary school, and I've never worn a dress. My mom's family liked girls to be delicate, pretty, stay-at-home moms at 20, and have kids. My mom's family was absolutely disgusted and outraged by me when I spent 5 years in cadets, earned my black belt in Taekwondo, and joined the army the week before my 18th birthday. So they hated me, and since I don't give a flip, family dinners usually ended in stern looks from my parents to shut up and stop engaging with their comments about me. So when this happened, Katie was still in the army and had received new deployment orders not long before. She was due to leave in 2 weeks, and we were together as much as possible because we knew how much we would miss each other. So on to the story. Now, my mom didn't have a choice to host a family dinner at our family home because we're fairly well off and we have the biggest home. I was living at home then, since my parents didn't want me on my own while I was recovering. And Katie and I were looking for a place ourselves around the time this went down. So Katie and I were talking in my room when they arrived. We had dinner, and my parents were forced to listen to my entitled aunt's political views, and frankly her screwed up opinions. Katie and I were talking with my cousin at the end of the table, and ignoring them. Now, our cousin wasn't bigoted or homophobic or anything, and we trusted her, so Katie and I told her about our engagement. We were mainly talking about the army, and I want to note at this particular time that my entitled aunt thought Katie was just a friend staying with us. Now, I had already committed a mortal sin in front of her, as I was holding a beer. And I want to note that another thing, she believed that girls shouldn't drink. Now, my sister Amy had a glass of wine, but my aunt said that wasn't bad because Amy was a, quote, proper lady. Now, anyone who's argued with my sister knows that she isn't, but never mind. My aunt had been staring back and forth at me while having a conversation when I guess she finally had enough and had to bring up my beer. This is the conversation. My aunt says, "What are you doing?" I told her I'm having a beer, and she says, "You can't have that." I asked her why, and she says, "You shouldn't be drinking." She then turns to my dad and says, "Control your sinning daughter." My dad tells her that she's 32, she can have a beer if she wants. So my aunt then looks at me and says, "No man's gonna marry a girl like you." Now, I was wearing my engagement ring and had a smug look on my face as I held it towards her. And I said, what was that? And with that, she sputters a little and says, "Well, where is he then? Have your parents met him?" I said yes, and she cuts me off and says, "You kiss him yet? You slept together? You know that's a sin, right?" Now at this, I replied, yes, and maybe. Now with that, my aunt completely loses it. She says, "You, don't tell me you're a slut. You need to stay away from your cousin. You will corrupt her." She then turns to my mom and says, "Are you aware of this behavior?" Now, my cousin was 28 years old, and I know for a fact that she has slept with her boyfriend. At this, I lost my cool. I probably would have hit her, but Katie put her hand on mine as a sign to calm me down and to hold me back. I ended up storming off, and Katie and I cooled off in my room for a bit before going back to the living room and talking with our cousin and Amy. This time, both Katie and I were having a beer, and she was sitting beside me on the sofa. My aunt comes back for round 2. She sees me with my beer and snatched it from me, saying, "How could you still be drinking when I told you not to? Does your fiance know about this? Do you have his permission?" I tell her, yes. As a matter of fact, I will call right now. I then look at Katie as she excused herself, and I knew what to do then. I take out my phone and flip through a recent call log to find Katie's number. And as soon as she saw the number named Sweetheart, my aunt snatches the phone and calls the number. Katie's phone rang, and she picked it up from across the room. The second it connected, my stupid aunt starts on a rant about how slutty I'd been acting and how drunk I was. Now, I was on my second beer, and I was completely sober. Katie was laughing, and my aunt ended with a question. She said, "Do you allow her to drink all the time? She'll corrupt my daughter." Now at this, Katie then says, I don't have to let my fiance drink, she does whatever she wants. Now the realization suddenly dawns on her, and my aunt's mouth opened like a fish, gaping at us. Amy was in hysterics, and since I didn't give a flip, I patted the space beside me on the sofa, looking at Katie. I then said, come on honey, we've only got 2 weeks until you leave. Now at that, Katie grinned. She walked over to lie beside me on the sofa as my aunt was still gaping. She yelled something about corrupting her daughter, threw my phone on the ground, and ran to my parents and yelled at them for having such a sinful daughter and supporting the work of Satan. My friends, entitled family members are the absolute worst. I don't know why OP's parents kept putting up with her like that. Like honestly, family or not, if you come into my house and disrespect my kid and cause that much of a ruckus, you're gonna get kicked out. It's as simple as that. So a few years back, I had a small 2-bedroom apartment in a very old building, in which you could hear everything. My bedroom was right next to the wall of my neighbor's. He was a stupid lunatic who always played video games until 4 or 5 a.m. and he had an anger issue because every time he would lose, he would start screaming. He would throw things around, punch the wall, waking me up almost every night. So at the time, I was working 2 jobs and needed every second of sleep I could get. Now I did try talking to him on several occasions, but he told me to just deal with it. So fast forward a few months and nothing had improved, and I was getting crazy about this. One Saturday night, I had a little poker game running with a few friends, and my neighbor was having one of his usual tantrums. Since I had guests and they don't like hearing that kind of stuff, we turned up the music. Everybody listened to something different, so there was a good mix of death metal, techno, industrial, and hardcore. My neighbor was furious at some point and apparently called the police to file a noise complaint. Luckily, when they pulled up, one of my guys saw them driving up as he was out having a quick cigarette. Now here comes the fun. So we turned the music down before they came up, so when they rang the doorbell and I opened, they couldn't hear anything noisy. Just a few guys having some beer and a little poker game. They told us there was a noise complaint from a neighbor saying it was too loud, and this was something constant. We told them we've been like this for hours. Then I had a genius idea. I asked them if my neighbor called them, which of course they couldn't answer, but I knew what was what. So I invite the 2 cops in and told them that I'd show them what a real noise disturbance looked like. I led them to my bedroom and told them to wait a few minutes. Now, it was pretty quiet over there, so I was afraid he stopped playing video games when, out of nowhere, I hear my neighbor throw a rage fit. We heard him thumping the floor, throwing things around, and smacking the wall. I told the cops the whole story, how this goes on very often, and since they're already here, that I would like to file a noise complaint against him. The cops were shocked at the noise from the other side and went directly over to his place to tell him to shut up basically. They told him to keep the noise down and don't call police for false emergencies. I had a huge laugh as the cops came back to tell me to call them when he did something like this again, because in that case, I would be able to file charges. So long story short, he thought the police would shut me down, and instead, it was the other way around. I never slept better than that night and finally had some peace at home. Currently, my wife is transitioning from social worker to dog trainer in hopes of training assistants/companion animals for people with a need. As someone who suffers from anxiety herself, she knows how good a trained assistance dog can be in stressful situations. This story takes place at an off-leash dog beach, close to where we live. My wife had just finished work and has decided to take our dog, who's a pup at the time, to the local off-leash beach for an impromptu training session. On arrival, she moves to a relatively quiet section of the beach and starts running the dog through some drop stays and recalls, and other things that are good to reinforce in a high distraction environment, with lots of other off-leash dogs and people around. After maybe 10 minutes, she releases the pup to have a run and play with the other dogs, and sits down on the beach to watch him play, occasionally recalling him to reinforce the behavior before letting him explore and play again. So as she's sitting there watching, she's approached by a father who's with a couple of his kids, which isn't odd for this particular off-leash area, as it isn't too far from the main beach. The conversation goes as follows. The dad comes up to her and says, "That's an amazingly well-trained dog you have there." My wife says thanks. I'm actually a dog trainer, but it helps that he loves to learn. The dad then says, "Now I'm not usually a fan of smaller dogs, but this one seems pretty smart." My wife says, "It's taken a while for him to get there, but he's doing great." They both watch him play for a minute or so and make more small talk. My wife's still recalling him every so often. The dad then says, "So, how's he with kids?" My wife says, "Oh, he loves them. Actually, he loves any attention, but he really loves playing with kids." So the dad then asked, "How much would you want for him?" Now at this, my wife laughs. She thinks he's joking and she says, "Some days I'd rehome him for free, but seriously, I couldn't live without him. I love him too much." The dad laughs and says, "No, but seriously, how much? I've never seen a small dog that I like as much as him." My wife laughs again, nervously this time, and says, "Honestly, I could never part with him for any amount of money. I'm sorry." "But you're a dog trainer though. You have the skills. You could always train yourself another dog." Now at this, my wife is starting to get a little worried. She says, "You know what? You could always get a dog and bring him along to our training center, and I could personally help you train him." The dad says, "But I really like your dog, and I generally don't like small dogs. He's so well trained." So the dad then takes out his wallet and starts counting money and says, "So come on, don't be unreasonable. How much for him?" My wife gets up as she's feeling uncomfortable. She says, "He's not for sale. Please stop asking." Dad says, "Listen, how much? My kids really like him." He then gestures to his kids playing with a pack of assorted dogs, including ours. And he goes on and says, "I'll pay you. I'll give you more than he's worth. For the last time, no, I'm not selling my dog. Now please leave me alone." She starts to move towards the car park, and she calls the dog to put him on his leash so she can leave. As the dog runs up to the beach, the dad tries to grab him by the collar, misses spectacularly, and gets a face full of sand. The wife gets him back on leash and gets to the car park before having a small panic attack standing at the back of her car. A couple of regulars do see her, and they calm her down, and she tells them the story, but by that time, the dad and his kids have gone. We go back a few days later together, and there's a printed notice on the beach entrance asking people to be vigilant, as there's a man that was sighted trying to take people's dogs. Oh my goodness, my friends. Okay, what's up with people offering to buy people's pets? Guys, I have read countless stories where people try to take dogs from their owners, and it's actually kind of disturbing. The fact that he tried grabbing the dog while it was running to its owner is even more disturbing, and I wish this ended with a guy getting arrested and charged, because he's probably out there still trying to kidnap dogs. So back in the early 1990s, I worked at a video game store attached to a mall. Like most stores of this kind in the 90s, we had several TVs and consoles set up that allowed people to try games. Now, as one would naturally expect, when kids walk by a store and see other people playing games, they wanted to play too. This caused a number of loitering kids to hang around the store all day, begging to play games. Finally, the owner had enough. We were told not to let random kids come into the store. My boss told me to put up a sign that said no unaccompanied minors allowed under the age of 13 to keep most of the little kids away. So one morning, I'm opening up the store. It's 10 a.m. I was straightening the displays, dusting the shelves, etc. when a woman comes into the store with two little kids, maybe around 8 or 9 years old. She bends over and gives them each a peck on the cheek and starts to leave. Now, I thought maybe she was gonna go sit on a bench and wait for them to browse the store or something, but I watched her walk down the mall to the exit. So at this point, I called after her saying, "Hey, excuse me, you can't leave your kids here." She then says, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be back in a couple of hours. I have an interview." I told her, yeah, so we're not babysitters and we're not here to watch your kids. I'm sorry." She then tells me they'll be fine. They just want to play the games. Don't let them leave the store. I'll be back in 3 hours, tops. That did leave me speechless, and she says, "Now I really have to go. I don't want to run late." And with that, she leaves. So I call the owner, and owner says to call security. I call security, and security calls police. 10 minutes later, 2 officers show up and eventually get the name, information, etc. out of the kids. The police confirm that mom is not, in fact, in the mall. I told them that she said she'd be back in a couple of hours, so an officer takes the kids to the nearby station across the store to await return. A little before 1 p.m., the mom comes back to the store. She starts freaking out because, surprise, surprise, her kids are gone. The mom starts screaming at me, and this is how the conversation went. Karen says, "Hey, where the heck are my kids? Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on them?" Now with this, I start to explain, but I'm cut off by the mom, and she screams, "How can you be so irresponsible? All you had to do was watch them, and now they're gone?" I told her, I'm sorry ma'am, but as soon as you left the mall, I had to call police. We're not a daycare. I can't just watch random people's kids. I have a store to run. Okay, so where are they? I told her they're with police. And she says, oh my god, you called police? But I see kids here all the time playing without parents. I tell her yes, but they shouldn't be, and we've since stopped allowing kids who are unsupervised to be here. I then call the number that the officer gave me, and a little while later, they show back up to arrest the mom. The mom is then taken from the mall in handcuffs, telling her that she'll be charged with child endangerment. I left the store shortly after that. So I later learned that several others had tried to drop their kids off at the store for babysitting, and the new retort was, so yeah, you can leave them here, but the last mom that did that got arrested and charged. My friends, I will never ever understand how people can just leave their kids with complete strangers and expect them to babysit. Like, you can find a family member, maybe a friend, or even a daycare for 3 hours. You just had to drop them off at a random video game store. Now, she probably did that 100% thinking it was free babysitting, but little did she know it probably costed her kids. I don't know. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories today, and if you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you missed the last episode on this channel, I will link it right here. OP gets some sweet, sweet revenge on the man who cheats on his aunt and left her broken. Guys, check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.